Welcome, everyone, to this episode 134 of Just Joshing. I'm your host, Joshua Pantelleresco. I write stuff and podcasts too. Today is a first. We're going to do a 3-part interview today. I got to talk to Tim Reynolds. Tim blew me away. So we are at When Words Collide. Me and Vanessa just did a Fox and Socks Off. And Tim is sitting in the audience going, holy shit. His exact words, I don't know whether you leveled up or leveled down Dr. Seuss with our performance. Because we had a blast, and we had the crowd cheering for what we did at When Words Collide. So Tim goes up and follows it, and he does a Muppet rendition of the Rainbow Connection. Like, it was incredible. I felt so bad for who had to follow that. I really, really did. It's like, how the hell do you top that? I'm glad it wasn't me. I really, really am. Tim's a comedian. Tim's a novelist. He's an excellent novelist. I'm going to talk about something he gave me, though. And it's a really good book. He did a... I'm hoping it's right here. Yes, it is right here. Stand Up and Succeed. Find success in everyday life by applying the cardinal rules of stand-up comedy. This book's brilliant. I would say it's number 3 of my all-time favorite, inspirational kind of books. One is an advertising book. That's number 1. But number 2 is 1,000 Steps to World Domination. But this is an amazing little book. It talks about, got some great quotes. I'm going to read one really quick here. Comedy is like fucking. Everyone thinks they can do it. And it talks, and the whole point of that was talking about how finding success looks easy from the outside, but about how hard it all. But he does encourage people. Everyone can find success if they truly want to, and I truly believe that. It's a great book, and you should check it out. So I'm going to go into part 1 here, and I'll probably have another great Tim Reynolds story for parts 2 and part 3. All right, so let's get into part 1.
No, well, the thing about...
I'm turning this on, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So we were just... I just know, if you want to say anything really incriminating, to make it good.
Okay, no, I appreciate the heads up that we're now live-ish.
Yeah. I just figured we're having a good conversation. We might as well keep it going, so...
Well, the one thing that I miss about Ontario is the fall colors.
Yes.
Because out here, if you get it at all, it's yellow.
It's yellow, and there's a little red, but it doesn't last long out here.
No, well, that tree in the front goes red.
Yeah.
But it's from Korea.
Yeah.
No, literally, it's a Korean maple.
No, I believe you. No, the one cool thing about Ontario in the fall is, you just have a kaleidoscope of color everywhere you go.
It's a photographer's dream.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the cool thing about Northern Ontario, too. The Canadian Shield, the forest, and all that stuff. It is such a pretty...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we do get a balancing act out here, though. We literally go 2 hours, and that's literally some of the most gorgeous scenery I've ever seen in my life. And it's just like...
Yeah, the Rocky Mountains are pretty hard to argue against.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you just...
But, the States give me Bryce Canyon over most of Canada anytime. In terms of view and... I used to joke and say, if you don't believe in God before you see sunrise at Bryce Canyon, you will when you're done. Yeah, and I told this to a friend of mine who was heading down that way. He and his girlfriend were traveling with the dog and the cameras. And he came back eventually after touring up through California and the Pacific coast. And I said, so how was the trip? And he looked at me and just wide-eyed. He says, I didn't believe what you said about sunrise at Bryce. He says, but once you've seen it, there's nothing. He says, the Grand Canyon was a hole in the ground compared to Bryce.
I've been in the vicinity of the Grand Canyon, but I've never been actually to Bryce, and it'd be kind of cool. States still has a lot of pretty places I haven't been to.
There's a long list of places I still have to get to.
Yeah.
So, Martha's Vineyard is one that I'm actually writing about, so I'm setting an alternate universe fantasy, urban fantasy there, because it's a modern day. Science and magic are side by side. And since my family comes from my ancestors come from Martha's Vineyard, that's an area that I want to write about.
So family very important to you?
That's right, family very important.
Yeah.
Definitely family immediate as well as family history.
Yeah.
My family's been, they have Wikipedia pages discussing members of my family who've shaped Canada and the U.S.
Nice.
So it's
so for you, it's almost like a legacy kind of deal.
It is. Oh, definitely, because I don't have kids of my own. I sort of mix this all in because the stories need, like in any culture, the stories passed down are what form everything from the history to the mythology. And many cultures, especially the still Aboriginal cultures, have a strong oral tradition. And our oral tradition is turned into Christmas kitchen parties, all gathered around too many beers and too many stories. But
yeah, oh, absolutely.
But I still like to mix in most of my. I've pretty much in my 2 novels I have blended in my family history with the actual novel.
That's a really cool thing because for me, right, my family's from Malta, so it's an interesting place because for me, my family has a history of literally my grandmother grew up during World War II. She was born literally when the war happened, and she spent the first 4 or 5 years of her life in caves. It's a really it's because again that's the only thing that could protect you against the bombs. Malta has always been a hotly contested area when it comes to war anywhere because it's too good a location for anybody. If you want to attack the north or the south, Malta's right there. It's a perfect.
It's changed hands so many times.
Absolutely. So I literally have my ancestry would have literally every culture in it because we have.
Do one of those DNA tests and it looks like a phone book.
Yeah. No. Totally. No. Yeah. Absolutely. It's the truth. It's the truth because Romans were there, Greece was there, various Arabic cultures were there, the English are there. I mean, and it's been fought over again and again and again. And that's my family.
Yeah.
That's my family's history. And now, for me, I'm over here, kind of following a tradition like my grandmother started. She came from Malta to the States to make a life for herself.
Right.
My dad went from the States to Canada to make a life for himself. Now, I'm 3,000 clicks away, and I'm kind of it's almost like history kind of repeats itself to some degree.
Well, you've got the wandering genes.
Yes. Totally.
And, or the conqueror's genes.
Yeah.
Depending on what, because if you've got that, you've got Romans and English and pretty much anybody who occupied Malta.
Yeah.
Were conquerors.
Absolutely.
As well as probably slaves at some point. So you're getting the whole mix in there.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and it's one of those things where it's like I mean, but the thing is, personally beyond my grandmother, I don't know that much about my family history because it gets lost beyond I know my great grandmother. My dad's into alternative medicine, and a lot of that comes from the fact my great grandmother, his grandmother, was really skilled in that stuff too, and it's just kind of something passed down with him. It's just so it's interesting how your family's legacies shape you. Definitely, it's kind of.
It can, yes. It's well, and for one way or another, I've got a very good friend of mine who's Métis.
Yeah.
But she grew up here in Calgary without her culture.
That's interesting.
It was they were in the city. It was not. She grew up as how to describe it. She knew of their culture.
Yeah.
But it was not an in-depth part of their day as it is with a number of my friends. And well, I'm the one in the family who's the historian. And stuff that I'm finding out that my family had no idea about. There are things Nova Scotia is part of Canada because of one of my cousins.
Really?
Charles Tupper.
Oh, wow.
Father of Confederation, Prime Minister of Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
His 5th great-grandfather was my 7th great-grandfather. So that's probably 42 times removed, sideways, standing on your head kind of cousins. But Buckley's. Cough medicine, that was us.
Wow.
My great-grandfather invented it, and he was a pharmacist along with the Buckleys, Mr. Buckley, Dr. Buckley probably, in Nova Scotia, and one of their kids married one of our kids. And at some point, the formula was sold from the Brown family, I believe it was, our side, to the Buckleys. So you blame us for that really awful taste, but I don't know what Buckley had done to it since then to make it commercial.
But the thing is, they haven't changed the taste in 100 years because it actually still works. It's one of the I'm not really a big thing in more traditional medicine. I'm very skeptical. Not so much because I distrust doctors or that. It's more the fact that I know that there's definitely a business end to medicine today. And
sure.
Absolutely. So, but Buckley still works.
It does.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
yeah.
Now, I don't know if the Buckley family knows the history, and it could just be an urban legend that's come down from my family. I haven't got any. I do have the with the Ancestry.com. I did find out where our family married into the Buckley family.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that that's where the family legend comes from. That was either sold to or part of a dowry. I don't know, but it's still kind of cool stuff.
There's no reason to necessarily doubt it. I mean, I think it's just, again, maybe I'm just a very innocent person, but I assume it's true unless words or actions prove otherwise, right? So if evidence shows up that makes a dispute, then I will reinvestigate the thing. But I just figured it's less cynical and more it's just easier.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, my family's full of storytellers, and sometimes they're full of shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you mean? No, that did not happen. How do you know it didn't happen? Because I was there with you when it didn't happen. But some of the stories that came from my dad, I mean, our family has connections to Russia, has connections to Cuba and Castro. They tried to recruit my father to help Castro take the island back in the late 50s.
That's
because of his military experience and where he was on. He was on a museum expedition, and he was registered as a member of the expedition. And his military experience would be perfect for a mercenary to take over an island.
Yeah.
Because he was land, sea, air, small arms.
So basically, he was the ultimate adaptable soldier, because it didn't really matter where he was going to go. He would just be like, okay.
And scuba.
Yeah. Oh wow.
In the 50s. Yeah.
Which is really huge. Even today, that's not a common skill.
No, he was that. Well, that was his expertise on the expedition. He was one of the scuba experts exploring the cenotes down in the Yucatan Peninsula for the ruins. But my dad was never a warrior. He was simply from a family of soldiers, and that was something he wanted to do. And when it was done, he moved on to some other career. But his military experience was still on record. But he wasn't into taking over islands and shooting people.
Well, no. I mean, that is an acquired taste, I think. I could be wrong on that. But
that was never his. He was never. Never that kind of a person. When the war was over, he was probably relieved that he didn't actually have to go and kill an enemy.
Yeah, my dad was almost drafted into Vietnam. He missed it by a month. They ended the war before he was going to go out there. Right?
Wow.
Back in the day, he's always relieved about that, and like I said, and that legacy still kind of haunts the States a little bit as well, because I remember going to a vitamin store, because again, my dad's into alternative health, and a father and son came in. There was this prize, and the son was going to go fill out his cards, and no, don't do that. This is how they got me. They got me with stuff like this to actually get drafted, and that's how they did it, though, right? Is that information, once you give that information, it becomes public domain. When it becomes public domain, people can find out information about you. I'm at the point now, like I just turned 35. I can officially, if there ever was a war tomorrow, I could be drafted for one more year, and that's it. And I'm
nice. Well, but you can run for president.
I could.
Oh no, you weren't. Were you burned?
No, I'm American born abroad.
Okay.
So technically, I still could. I'd have to live there for about 5-10 years though before I could do it. I don't want to. That seems like too much like work. And
what, becoming president?
Yeah, it seems too much like work.
The current one isn't doing much work.
No, but
all you got to do is your work is 140 characters long or whatever a tweet is.
Yeah, but getting to that point seems like a lot of work.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of work.
It's tough to get your own reality show and yell at people and
build
hotels. Mind you, whether he's been successful or not.
I came to a conclusion about him, and ever since then I stopped paying attention to him. And I know that seems like a terrible thing, but I came to a good conclusion about him. I realized he's a character on television. And when I looked at him from that light, I was like, so the best thing I could actually do to deal with this guy is ignore the platforms, do my own research on what really is going on. Because someone like that is really only good for one thing. He's a distraction.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. That's all he's good for.
The GOP right now are a party of magicians saying, watch our left hand
yes.
while we make blank, blank, and blank disappear with our right.
Exactly.
And whatever it is, I think that there are layers of that we will have. I've got friends who believe, conspiracy theorists who believe in shadow governments, and they'll tell you that your cell phone's watching you 24 hours, and that mosquito is actually a drone, and like they get really into that kind of observational stuff. And I go, okay, well, there's a line I'll draw, or there's maybe a line that I'll put in the sand and say, beyond this point, there's nothing I can do about it. So why am I going to worry about it?
Well, that's where I'm at. Like, I actually look, just logistically speaking, the U.S. government's huge. Like, it is a big. Like, if you just even look at what's visible, it's a giant monster machine. It really is. Like, just Homeland Security, CIA.
Most governments are. Just because Canada is quiet and not really a warlike nation, we sort of come in to support and give great support our men and women in the services, doesn't mean that we don't have underground facilities that are monitoring everybody's phone calls. But you're right. But the U.S. is 10, 100 times bigger.
It's a monster. I mean, there's no... Just logistically speaking, it only makes sense that there would be some kind of shadow government. There'd have to be. Just based, if nothing more, from the fact that every single agency out there is inefficient by their design. So, I mean, it would just make sense there would be things that would fall between the cracks. It just...
Sure. Yeah. And I'm kind of glad that there are, because somebody needs to make sure that the clowns get into the ring on time to do their part of the performance.
Absolutely.
And the U.S. is not... Right now, they're the laughingstock of the world, sadly enough. It's a great nation in many ways, but somebody, fortunately, has been making sure that at least keeps its head above water when you get the clowns, or... Well, mind you, the people who... I look at the U.S. right now is that Firefly was canceled after, a dozen episodes?
Yeah, after like one season.
Yet Honey Boo Boo continued on for 56 episodes or something crazy like that. That's who was voting at the last election, was people who thought that Firefly wasn't viable and Honey Boo Boo was worth watching, and that's who they elected. They elected Big Honey Boo Boo.
They elected Barney Fife is what they actually elected.
I like Barney Fife.
I do too. I wouldn't want him to be president. I mean, I just.
Do you know who they are? If we're going to go with a television character that is like Trump, I'd go almost with Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners.
Yes.
The Jackie Gleason character, who was very loud, almost always wrong, and tried to keep his wife in second place, his best friend in third place, and yet he was a big buffoon.
Yeah.
And Gleason, from what I understand, was not like that, but I haven't done much research in it. But when I watch that, him or Archie Bunker.
Yeah. It's funny because actually looking back at old television, the one movie that really resonates with me with what's going on, literally word for word. I put this on my blog. The Mad as Hell not taking any more speech from the network.
Oh, Peter Finch.
Yeah, Peter Finch. It actually, if you listen to it, look at our problems today. The problems they're talking about in there, they're almost the exact same thing.
Things aren't changing.
No.
Which is, in a sense, why Trump was elected. And I understand... Donald Trump did not get the party, but Trump specifically did not get elected because America is a nation of white supremacist, racist, hate-filled Christians.
No.
That is not an accurate description of the U.S. But to say that he got elected because people were so tired of the old system, their town shutting down because the mills are being shut down and the work is being shipped to China and other nations, Canada, Mexico, the people's futures are in doubt. And that's what they're looking at. Is here's a man who got up. They all knew him. He wasn't connected loudly like Hillary was to the banking industries. And he's saying, I'm going to change this. We're going to stop this. And they're all going, oh, please, somebody get up and say we'll get some kind of change. And whether it's happening or not, they saw hope.
Yeah.
They really did. And they were willing to ignore all his idiocy in exchange for a brass, not even a brass ring, aluminum.
No, because the system really does. Okay, I mean, think about what we're doing right now. We're having a conversation that's going to be recorded and will be played. Pardon me, will be played.
Yeah, and I'll never be allowed back in the U.S.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I can get you in. Don't worry about it. But I mean, but the thing is, interesting thing is, like, I've had conversations with people from Australia, England, and all over the world to do my podcast, and a legitimate thought crossed my mind. Really, we have more tools today to communicate with each other than we ever had in the past.
Oh yes.
And
faster.
So the question really becomes, okay, so if you look at this strictly from, you do need some kind of government structure still, yes.
Yeah.
However, if I'm talking to you directly, and I can talk to you anytime, any place, anywhere, pretty much, as long as you have a phone or a Twitter or a Facebook account, well then the question really becomes, do you need a big government anymore? Do you what you it's almost like, in one sense, a throwback now, is me and you have more of a vehicle now to solve our problems because we can talk to each other like that. So what is a government for? It's for when diplomacy between, let's say me and you have a disagreement over something, and for whatever reason we decide to become like a Twitter troll and just get completely unreasonable. Then someone would step in and kind of deal with it. But do you need a large government for that anymore? I mean,
or should we be going in the opposite direction where, because everybody is so connected, we are no longer just Canadians and Americans and
that's where we're
and maybe we should. The United Nations is not a government, but maybe there needs to be a world government. That we are now citizens. We all have access, most of us, to the same information. Should there be a governing body that sort of, like you say, someone steps in and stops the Twitter troll? I think part of the problem is that we are, with all of this communication, all of these wonderful federal governments, not so wonderful one, national leaders, have almost become like community leaders.
Yes.
Because we are, Canada, or use the U.S. as an example, 300 million plus, very large space, and up until the internet, a lot of the world, they got their information from books, papers, television.
Yep.
And the U.S. could have gotten that from other parts of the world, but now you've got the whole world we know what's happening in Paris while it's happening. We could go, either one of us could go onto our phones, our telephones.
Exactly.
And look at the live footage of what's happening in Houston right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's that connecting, that connection, that giant spider web, the international, the World Wide Web, almost needs an overseeing. But the problem is, once you put somebody in charge, then you're going to get a conflict of interest. Because just go something simple like Britain. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a monarchy. And I mean, sure, it's a little more complicated than that, but then you got the U.S., which isn't. Then you've got China, which isn't. So even though all the citizens will have access to the same thing, they don't all have the same rights. And who's to say that the rules coming out of Saudi Arabia are worse than the rules coming out of Kuala Lumpur or whatever?
I think we're coming to an interesting question. It's a scary question because it's something to talk about. Again, ironically, back to Neckard, there's a scene where there are no nations, there are no peoples. That's what we're kind of talking about here.
Yeah.
We're looking at now the concept of countries versus like almost conglomerates. I'm not necessarily a corporate type, but just like.
No, but you're right.
Yeah. It's the technology today that makes that possible. The fact is, I talk to people from all over the world. I can talk and shoot the shit with anybody now today, and that's a great thing. That's a great thing. And so I think at some point, I mean, and probably sooner than later, because again, I almost feel like the truly scary thing about a guy like Trump is he's the beginning. If something doesn't change down there, like really significantly changes, it's only going to get worse. And then again, I'm not going to say that they're going to create another Hitler. I'm not going to say that one way or the other. But you might have somebody in there like that will. Again, you might have where the system implodes. Well, how do you stop that from happening again? right? Yeah. And the reason why we're picking on the States here is because today still they are the country that has the biggest impact on the rest of the world. All right.
Yeah.
That's changing. Like I think in 20 years,
it's changing It's changed since he took over in January.
Yeah.
The U.S. has been higher in the news internationally.
Yes.
But lower in influence. Mm-hmm. They are no longer the big brother that other nations are looking to for guidance and leadership, as they were under Obama and previous leaders. I'm not saying he was God's gift to world leadership, although I could go on and on about how positive I do think about his work. But unfortunately, I think I'm not. Well, we won't even talk about Trump's opposition in that election, either one of them. But his people they're not taking America seriously.
No,
they're which is sad. If Trump resigned, I won't say anything dark or evil about him leaving. Just simply, let's say he gave up and says, this is silly. What am I doing with my life? Thank you very much. I'm out of here. Pence, you take over. So now we've got President Pence, and I think that the rest of the world would take America a little more seriously, mostly because he's not a blowhard. I'm not saying what he wants to do with the nation and the rest of the party behind him is positive and good, but when he's standing on slightly more solid ground, and you want that in a partner in business and war. You don't want volatility. I mean, when you've got nobody takes North Korea seriously other than as an enemy. North Korea scares the hell out of the rest of the world, except maybe China. And Donald Trump is starting to scare people in a similar way because he's starting to act as nuts as we hear the North Korean leader does.
It's almost like I go back to back when the popes and papacy was ruling the world. Like some popes were insane. Like they were legitimately.
Oh well,
yeah. I mean, some of them.
And we're not even talking the Catholic Church. We're talking the papacy. Yes.
Yeah, we're talking the papacy. We're not talking the church. It's just like some of the leaders that came out of that boggled the mind. Yeah,
I'm a firm believer. It's all about keeping men in power.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And throughout history. I won't even say keeping people in power. I'll say keeping men in power, and almost always keeping white men in power. And I come from white privilege, so when I say that, I'm not knocking whites because I'm not. I am. Your podcasters don't see that.
No.
They don't know that my family came over on the Mayflower, and we have a dark history I'm not proud of, and I'm not going to discuss it here because I prefer to just keep that to one side.
No. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
It is also the kind of thing we've also done good things that I'm proud of, but I also know that a lot of the shit that's happened in history, my family's either been running into it or running out of it. Mm-hmm. And we got chased out of Salem, Massachusetts, and you can wonder why we would be chased out of a town back in the 1600s.
Okay.
Exactly. I don't know, and I can't go back to ask.
But I'm not going to ask those questions on this podcast.
But with the papacy and any religious leadership, but especially with that one, as you say, the corruption.
Yeah.
Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church. Well, because he wanted to divorce one of his wives. So really, as I joke, being an Anglican, Church of England, I say my church was founded on sex.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
Henry VIII wanted more or different, and so that's why he and Cardinal Wolsey broke. But there's a little more to the history and the reasoning than that. But that was corruption. Yes, and the problem is, I think when the papacy, when the Medici popes specifically. The corruption there was because they were allowed to combine religion, government, and business. There was profit to be made, and that's where you see almost all the damage being done in world history.
Well, I've said this on the podcast in the past. Mussolini described fascism as a merger between corporate and government. That's the United States right now, right? That is the United. I'm not saying, like you said, it's necessarily like the regime's crazy, whatever. It's an open fascism. I don't think there's an argument really right now, right?
Yeah,
and that's just that, right? But so I look at it kind of like that's saying I think there has to be a separation between profit and government, and it's a very hard balancing line because
yes.
Yeah, it's a really hard one because you need a government to have it. Here's the problem: you need government to be strong enough to be able to make laws and enforce them.
Yes.
Right, and that's really important, especially when you're dealing with today. We have these giant conglomerates that do need some kind of. I think the best argument for a United Nations like government is simply this: corporations don't have borders, so you need some kind of law enforcement that also wouldn't have borders as well, because it's the only way to police that, right? That's the best argument for it. But the thing of it is, right?
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Because what happens is you can eventually, if you just making laws, that's all your power. Well, you can still use that if you really want to, just to get your way over time. It might take.
That's what lobbying in Washington is.
Yes.
Is the business guys going to the government guys saying, "Hey, we need you to tweak this, beat this, put this in." Mm-hmm. However, this proposal, this law, this bill, and I shouldn't even say Washington because it happens everywhere, but we're in the West, so we know more about it, and film and television make a big deal of it.
Absolutely.
That, it's all in their favor. And it could be it happens here in Alberta in Canada, where suddenly mineral rights in provincial and national protected areas are being given up, and corporations are being able to deforest areas that were previously protected. In the States, that was a big issue a few months ago, and I don't know what's happened with it. With their national forests suddenly being pretty much the doors thrown open was the threat that they were going to be able to just go in and clean out and take what they wanted. It's something that sort of flashed in the news, and I haven't heard much of it since. But then again,
left hand, right hand there. That's
exactly. There's the magician again, the David Copperfield of government, and oh, look at the flash in my left hand. Where'd the elephant go?
Yeah.
Oh wait, the elephant's in the office, and he's wearing a wig.
Yeah, that's right. And he's pink and fluffy.
Yes. Yeah, we all need a strong drink, but it's a tough. We could spend hours discussing world governments, and your listeners will also, for everything statement we make, there'll be at least one listener who will say, that's wrong. That's fine. We're not experts on it.
We're shooting the shit.
But you got to realize this, there is no right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got, and you just look at the three biggest parties right now, or governments. Let's use Russia, the superpowers. Russia not so much now, but they still have power. Russia, the U.S., and China. Okay, Russia went from the communism, and it failed. I don't know all of the details, but a lot of it had to do with trying to do business and trying to become a little more of a capitalistic society, and their corruption levels there defeated them. The U.S. has always stayed, quote unquote, free and not a communist society, and you're able to make the money you want, believe in what you want. And then there's China, where beliefs are restricted, and the government has a great deal of power, and people live in fear. But if you look at their manufacturing base, and you look at what the profits they're able to make, that China is taking bits and pieces from the free world that work for them, and they're building a very solid nation. And when you see science fiction like Firefly having Mandarin Cantonese as the second language and third language in a future society in space, I don't think that's
I think it's
a bizarre thought, because I think I would love to see China get rid of their suppressive communist, I won't even say communist because they're not a true communist nation, not by the definition of communism. It's not communal.
No.
I'd love to see them become a more open, free, and less oppressive nation, and still keep a lot of their methods, the good methods that they're using for manufacturing business, so they actually became a power to admire, rather than a power to fear, which is what the U.S. had been and is now starting to. It's a dog pack that's fighting amongst itself, and it's a bunch of.
Well, it's funny because an interesting thing, because I've been studying China since about 2009, after the first economic collapse, because it was like when the housing bubble went in the States. Right. I was in the States at the time, and I was like, okay, I want to understand what's going on with how is their money working. That's a convoluted mess. Not for this podcast. Yeah. That is right. But interestingly enough, China. The interesting thing is China. Part of it is manpower.
Yeah.
Part of it is they leave Hong Kong the hell alone. They don't like when Hong Kong came back to them. They didn't touch it. They were like, you know what?
It works. Let's leave it alone.
Yeah, that was their whole thing on that one.
Well, that's their gateway to the West.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. But they're like, you know what? This works. It makes too much money. And I'm not saying Hong Kong doesn't have its problems, because the world everywhere has its problems. Yeah. But they were like, by and large, compared to the rest of the world, they're not touched. And then the other thing too is, the interesting thing is, China's been very quietly. Again, they're one of the country's biggest favor of a world currency, because the way they look at it is they actually have a shot at being the world currency, because they're one of the few nations. Again, their money's not quite what it was a few years ago, but they're still growing, they're still expanding, and their strength, their manpower and their manufacturing base alone will keep them afloat through almost anything. And that's
true, but there are a lot who will say that what China has is a slave culture, and even though people are making a wage, it's a slave wage, and they.
And that will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can. You can do this a number of different ways. You can subscribe to the podcast either through iTunes or through Podomatic. If you do so, please leave a review. Tell me what you liked about the show, what you hate about the show. Just don't hate too loud, okay, guys? Because I'm sensitive and stuff. Actually, it really doesn't matter to me. Just leave a comment. Let me know what's going on. If you like what you're hearing, that'd be great. Beyond that, you could also buy my books. At this point, The Watcher, Storm Dancer, and The Wandering God are done. The series is complete. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at mirrorworldpublishing.com. You can get them anywhere books are sold electronically. You can also ask your local chapters, Barnes & Noble or Amazon, to get them in stock. I would love if you did. If you hate the book, just don't tell anybody, okay? Okay. Beyond that, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Joshua Penteloresco. Currently, past archived episodes of the podcast are there. More and more episodes are going there as we speak. Definitely should check that out and do what needs to be done. Above all else, though, whether you support me or you don't, thank you for listening. You should stay inspired. Do what you feel called to do. Don't be afraid to make the sacrifices required to find the success you're looking for. Because the real secret is, what are you willing to give up to go forward? That, more than anything else, I think determines how far you go. All right, guys, you take care of yourselves. All right, see you next time.
Josh.